Next to me is the 2020 BMW X3M Competition. And short of the M4 CSL, this makes the highest specific output of any BMW ever. So, what is it like to drive? Today we're going to find out exactly that. Under the hood of the X3M is the strongest inline-six BMW has ever made, the S58. It pumps out in stock form 503 horsepower and 442 pound-feet of torque, which is good to sprint this SUV from 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds and the quarter mile in 11.6. But the amazing part is because we've got a forged crankshaft, connecting rods, as well as pistons, you can tune this thing up to an impressive amount of horsepower. Downpipes and a tune and some weight reduction, and people have gotten this in the high 9s in the quarter mile. 2020 is the first year BMW ever made an M version of the X3. Prior to that, you had to spend a heck of a lot more money for an X5M or X6M. And the good news is, they haven't made a ton of differences between a 2020 and a 2024. There's some bumper upgrades and a little bit bigger of a screen, but effectively it means instead of spending 80 or 90 grand on a new X3M, you can get one of these for high 40s to mid 50s in good condition. Definitely do that. Don't buy a new one. Looks-wise, the X3M is fantastic inside and out. I love the fact that they've maintained this look to the grille and front bumper and didn't go for the bucktooth style look on the G80 M3. And honestly, if you're not tracking the car all the time, you're effectively getting the same level of performance as an M3 for less money with added practicality. The X3M features all-wheel drive, and it's got the same electronically controlled limited slip differential as the BMW M5. Competition gets 21-inch wheels. The standard X3M gets 20s. You also get a top speed increase to 177 miles an hour versus 155. Around back, the Competition gets a sports exhaust as standard. We've got a quad exhaust with a cool rear diffuser and a mini spoiler. The awesome part is you actually have a ton of storage space inside of the X3, like a significant amount, even with the rear seats folded upwards. And if you fold them down, you get even more space. There's a little luggage divider right here that can even store underneath this area right here. The interior of the X3M is super nice as well. For the Competition, we have more bolstered seats. I really like the hexagonal pattern in the middle, makes it look more luxurious. We got carbon fiber all over the dash, one of the best steering wheels in the business. Of course, we've got M1 and M2, which are customizable driving modes, where you can change the throttle response, the suspension, the exhaust, etc. So, what's it like to drive? Let's take it out and find out. All right, behind the wheel of the X3M now. This car isn't stock. It's got a stage 1 tune and it's running on a mixture of ethanol. And shockingly, this thing already makes north of 600 horsepower with just a tune, no modifications to the exhaust whatsoever. The owner of this car actually happens to be a friend of mine, Jackson. I've got his information in the description below. He's got downpipes coming. That's where things really start to get interesting. You get upwards of 650 wheel horsepower. With some weight savings, if you remove some of the seats, some trim, you can break into the 9s, very high 9s, obviously, in the quarter mile, which is really, really fast. I mean, now you've got supercars or last generation hypercar level of acceleration in the quarter mile in a family SUV, effectively, which is unbelievable. Now, if you don't do any weight savings, because obviously removing the seats and interior trim in an everyday car doesn't really make much sense other than for setting records, you can still run really low 10s. People have done a 10.1 in the quarter mile. For reference, a Lamborghini Huracan runs a 10.5. So effectively, for 2 or 3 grand on top of the price of this car, you can get something that's legitimately faster than a Lamborghini Huracan or a Ferrari 488. Which is absolutely hilarious in my opinion. And then that also brings into question the value of these cars. So new, you were talking, well, if you want to buy a 2024 right now, $80,000 or $90,000. But used, you can find these all day long for high 40s to low to mid 50s. I mean, depending upon how many miles you want on it, I'm sure you could probably find one with really high mileage for mid 40s. If you want a really clean one, it's going to be mid 50s. But for that price range, it's an unbelievably good SUV. And it doesn't drive like an SUV. It's not as large as an X5 or an X6. Now, surprisingly, BMW does such a good job with their weight distribution. So even the X5M, which I've reviewed before, feels closer to an M5 than you would think it would. Obviously, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot taller, the center of gravity is higher off the ground, but it still handles really well. and gives you a level of confidence you wouldn't expect in an SUV. Now, this being smaller by a significant margin than the X5M, it weighs 4,500 pounds, which by today's standards is lighter than a lot of sedans, which is kind of sad that cars are progressing in that direction. But even the G80 M3 weighs about 4,000 pounds. So you've only got about 500 extra pounds of mass. Obviously, if you tuned this thing just in stage 1, this thing is gonna be faster than a stock G80, which is unbelievably awesome. The seats are surprisingly supportive. The competition comes with more intense buckets. I love the design language of the seats themselves with this really cool quilting in the center of the seats. It breaks up the design and makes it look really high end. Honestly, the overall feel of this car when you're inside of it is that it's expensive. And I think the value proposition is really impressive with the X3M. It's easy to drive. You're not super high off the ground. It doesn't feel exactly like an M3. You're obviously raised more off the ground. You've obviously got more weight to push around, but you've got a ridiculous amount of storage space in the back. You've got plenty of legroom and headroom for your rear seat occupants. And then it's all-wheel drive. You could obviously take this up to the ski slopes, drive it in the rain, no problem at all. The level of traction off the line is super impressive because of that all-wheel drive. And another cool thing about the all-wheel drive system is you can send 100% of the torque to the rear wheel. And because of that torque split, you get a more rear-wheel drive feeling vehicle that doesn't feel like it's gonna push in the corners, but then you've got that added stability and traction when you need it because of the all-wheel drive, obviously. But this thing is impressive. The level of grip you get in the corners is borderline hilarious for an SUV. This isn't even on the best tires, honestly, but it's got a decent amount of traction. I like this thing. Honestly, for 50 grand, this is one heck of a daily driver. It doesn't get much better. And then of course that S58, that tuning capability is unbelievable. I mean, the sky is almost the limit with power modifications. And for just stock turbos to run low 10s, we're not even talking about hybrid pure turbo 850s or anything like that. Very minimally invasive modifications that are unlikely to reduce reliability by a significant margin is a pretty cool thing. I love how the steering wheel feels in your hands, gives you so much confidence. It's just classic BMW in the best way possible. Now, the 8-speed automatic transmission, whereas in the G80 M3, I kind of miss the DCT and wish it had snappier upshifts and downshifts. Because of the slightly more relaxed nature, it being a small SUV, I don't feel like I'm missing that DCT. I think the added fuel economy as well as, I mean, you're not gonna get great fuel economy, let's be honest, but the added smoothness and around town drivability of the automatic makes all the sense in the world in this standpoint. We've got a heads up display, we've got wireless charging, you've got Apple CarPlay, you've got a beautiful instrument cluster as well as a digital infotainment screen. And apart from a couple of differences like some front bumper differences, a bigger screen, a little bit more torque, a brand new 2024 X3M isn't offering all that much more, and it's gonna set you back maybe $40,000 more than this. So if you are looking for an X3M, I'd say get a 2020 or a 2021 pre-facelift. In 2022, they did the facelift, and save yourself a bunch of money. Spend 2-3 grand of that on some modifications so it's super fast, and then pocket the rest because you don't need to spend it. Sounds pretty good too for a stock exhaust. I like the way this thing sounds. It's smooth. That inline 6 just sounds smooth and doesn't have that raspy fart like the F80 generation of engines did. I'm impressed. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Like always, please browse the channel and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you next video.